Started. What's up, everyone? Happy Friday or Saturday, wherever you happen to be. Today, we're going to talk about tips for songwriting. Essentially, I'm going to show you some rules that you want to keep in mind and how to use music theory to make your songs way better. The discount code Christmas sale is, the code is Xmas, Xmas, and it is, 40% off each, right, Billy? My Beato book and my Beato ear training method, 40% off both. That's a big sale. I haven't sold just the book in a long time, but if you're going to get it, you can get a gift card for people if you want to get it as a gift. You can find it on my website at beato.com. Okay, I have a chord progression written out here. I'm not sure if any of you actually recognize this song, but it's actually a Beatles song. It's a chord progression to a Beatles song, Day in the Life. And it actually is a perfect example of melody writing. We're going to talk about the melody, and we're going to talk about some rules on what you want to have, what you want to avoid or use when writing great melodies. Now, the first tip that I have is try to avoid too many roots. Roots of the chords, right? If you have a G chord, like the first chord in the song, you want to try and avoid G, okay? There's the root, there's the root. Da, 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 da. If we take the first phrase in A Day in the Life, the first melody note is the third. Third, fifth, third, and then to the 11th on the B minor chord, okay? So we're going to talk about the second rule here is use upper extensions. I'll just say use ninths, 11ths. That includes sharp 11s. And and sevenths for color. You can use 13ths on minor chords, but not on major. You want to avoid them on major chords. I'm going to talk about that. That's kind of another rule that we're going to talk about here. Okay, those upper extensions, the 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths, this is really important because this is what makes melodies stand out, these upper extensions, 9ths, 11ths, 13ths. We just saw it in the beginning of the melody, right? So we go, and then to the 11 on B minor, and then he goes 11, then he goes root, third, 11, and then to the fifth of the E minor chord, the third chord in here. So the first upper extension in the melody happens on the B minor chord, right? Here, so we got da, 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 da. You can actually hear that that's not a member of the chord. If I play this, and I want to do in this octave here. That doesn't sound good there. Okay, I'll do it here. You guys can see it on the screen, right? Yes, perfect. So this would be the third of the B minor. This is the 11th. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4. So remember the 11th, does it sound okay, Billy?
It's echoing a little bit.
It is?
Just a little bit.
Okay, it's going through, oh, I know why. Is it echoing when I do the piano?
Yeah, just the piano.
Oh, okay, don't worry about it. I'll use the guitar. I knew why. Okay. So, the 11th on the B minor, okay, is the first tension note, first upper extension. We get to the 5th, then on the C chord, we got da da da, right? So we have the 5th major 7, right? Back to the root. So you got 5th, 7th root, Then we got da, da, da. So on the G over B chord, we have the third. So it's da, da, da. Think of it as the G chord. There's the ninth there. Da, da, da. So we, on the A minor chord, we have the fifth to the sus2 to the ninth. Right? So tension notes here, really a tension note here, tension note here. So there's all these tension notes or upper extensions used in the melody. If you don't have those, your melody will not have color. What you notice, one thing to notice is that there's really very few roots in this, right? You got the C, but it's really at the end of the bar. Okay, on the F major chord, the sharp 4 or sharp 11. Then sharp 11, the ninth to the, or I'm sorry, sharp 11, third, ninth. Okay? So right there, he's using the sharp 11 or the sharp 4, Lydian sound. So all of this entire progression is in the key of G, right? 1 chord, 6 chord, I'm sorry, 1 chord, 3 chord, 6 chord. That's a passing bass note there. 4 chord, 1 chord, 2 chord. This chord, though, is borrowed. When it gets to F major here, is borrowed from a different key. Or you could say, well, this is all C major, maybe. Is it C major? Let me think about this. If you look at here, can you analyze it all in C major? Yes, you can, right? So you got 1, 5, 2, I'm sorry, yeah, 1, 5, 2, no, you can't do it in C. Okay, so it is in G. So this F is going to be borrowed from C major. That would be the 4 chord in C major. So that's a little bit of a modal shift there, but not much of one. It's a really cool sound hearing that F. He uses it in the song a bunch of times, actually. So, and he uses the sharp 4 on that. One of the reasons that the sharp 4 works is because it's actually in the key of G too. The note B is the sharp 4, right? So let's talk about some of these other rules. Another thing you don't want to do is you want to use inversions in your chord progression. Very important. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, McCartney plays on the B minor chord. Some of the times he plays, he puts the fifth and the bass on the B minor chord, right? So it's really B minor over F sharp. Sometimes he plays B. This here is that he walks down. The guitar is just playing E minor. Da, 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 da. Right? So inversions. Here's an inversion. So it's a first inversion major chord. And there's a bunch of inversions if you listen through the whole song. McCartney is constantly moving around with the bass. Sometimes he plays E here. He plays, I mean, really every time around he's playing something different. And one of the things that he did was he would put the bass line on last. He would listen to the melody and then make sure that he wasn't playing the melody note in the bass, okay? You don't want to double the bass line. That's another important thing. Don't double the bass. Now, when I say the bass, I'm not saying the root. Now, the bass can be the root. But if I have a B minor chord and I put F sharp in the bass, I'm probably going to avoid the note F sharp in the melody. At least right where the B minor is, right? Where I play the F sharp if I'm passing or something like that. These are really, really great songwriting rules that when I was producing songs, these are things that I would follow. And every great song follows these rules. It's amazing. It's just the way that people hear melodies. You know, a long time ago, there was an Alanis Morissette song. I don't remember what it was. It was not a hit. And when it came out, somebody said, "Hey, have you heard the new Alanis Morissette song?" And I love Alanis Morissette. And I said, "Yeah." And my buddy was like, "What do you think?" I said, "Oh my God, she just doubles the bass line in the melody. It's a very weak melody." And the song flopped. Total flop. And I said that to my buddy. I was like, "Oh, that song will never be a hit because it's..." And I don't even remember what it was. I said, "Because she's doubling the bass the whole time." When you double the bass, these are rules that you'll learn in your first... If you take music theory in college, right? You don't want to have parallel octaves. Well, a simpler way of doing that is like you don't want to have parallel... you don't want to have the melody following the bass line because it's basically parallel octaves or parallel unisons, right? It just weakens the melody. You always want to have a melody that harmonizes with the bass line. That's why on my top 10 drop D songs, when I used On a Plane by Nirvana, he's never doing the root. Da, da, da. So he's like... sus4 to the third, and then da da da. These are, this is in 6 with a melody. Da 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 to the third there, right? Da 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 da. Kurt Cobain was a master of never doubling the bass, never doubling the root. That's why his melodies were so strong. So if you just follow, now, did he know the theory behind this? No, he just heard it that way. So if you're not lucky enough to hear melodies that way, you can just really improve your songs quickly. Now, one of the things that I noticed, probably the most common mistake that songwriters would make, and by the way, all of this theory is in my book. Here's your plug. You want to get a good Christmas gift for yourself or for your friend or brother or sister or parent? Discount code Xmas. 40% off my Beato book. 40% off my ear training program. XMAS. All this stuff is in there. Now, probably the most egregious mistake that I would find in melodies is when people use the 6th on a major chord. Okay? No 6ths on major chords. Ugh, sorry, my major chords. Okay. I mean, occasionally you can use a 6th, but you really want to try to avoid it. I'll tell you why. You might get a little echo here. Is that where you're hearing the echo with the piano, Billy?
Yeah, just the piano.
Okay. I'm going to play a chord, a G chord, right? Deal with the echo here for a second. Root, 3rd, 5th. All those notes sound good. The 2nd sounds good, right? The 4 wants to move down, or the sharp 4 sounds good, but the 6th is very weak. The 6th is the weakest note melodically on a major chord. I'll tell you why. If you take the overtone series, or let's say you take a scale and you just string out the scale but building in thirds. We'll take C major. So there's root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, let's say sharp 11, and 13. This note here, this A, the 6th, really wants to resolve down to the 5th. It's the weakest melody note. And anytime you hear a note in a melody that sounds like, that doesn't sound good there, it's always the 6th. It's also impossible to harmonize the 6th and have it sound good. You cannot write good harmonies if you have a 6th in the melody, okay? What you want to do is you want to use chord tones or those lower upper extensions, 9ths and 11ths, or 7ths, 9ths, and 11ths. because they're easier to harmonize, right? If the melody on a C major chord is the note E, the other two notes of a C major chord are available for harmony, the G or the C. Okay, if you want a lower harmony, the C would be your harmony. If you want a higher harmony, the G would be your harmony. Okay, if you want a 3-part, the C and G would be your harmonies if the E is the melody. So it helps you to know your inversions of chords, to always know what notes are available for harmony. Okay, if I have a C major chord and I have the note D, do, that F sharp could be a good harmony note because it sounds really good, right? Or B would be a good harmony note. It's a third away. Okay? The problem when you get to that 6th, I mean, you could have the sharp 11 in the 6th, but it's typically just a very weak move in melody writing, using the 6th in the melody. I will go through, and when I would do pre-production with artists or go into songwriting sessions or whatever, usually pre-production, that would be the first thing. I was like, nope, you got to change that note. And they don't know why, but when you change it to the 5th, you know, they're like, oh, wow, that sounds so much better. Why didn't I think of that? I mean, these are very basic things too, but they're not obvious. Okay. And I don't think about this. I don't think the theory like, oh, that's a 6th there. To me, it just sounds wrong. And when I heard it, when I was learning about songwriting or learning songs that had great melodies, when I would hear something that wasn't right and I would figure it out, it would always be the 6th. Okay, so no 6th on major chords. Now, 6th on minor chords can be very cool. Okay, those are great tension notes on minor chords, and you hear them a lot. The flat 6 is very common. If you guys follow me on Instagram, I've done videos where I talk about how to use the flat 6, how to use the natural 6 on minor chords. Follow me at Rick Beato 1. If you don't follow me, I post there pretty much every single day. I do guitar posts, and they're pretty much all little short 1-minute lessons on their concepts and everything. But I show how to use these notes, how to use the flat 6, how to use natural 6. Really strong melodies. There's many. If you're writing in minor keys, the flat 6 is a killer thing to use, and the natural 6. People like Sting use them, Joni Mitchell, a lot more advanced melody writers. Eleanor Rigby uses the natural 6th and the flat 6th in the melody. It's uses what we call modal interchange. Okay. He uses. On the first phrase, he uses the natural 6. He's like, oh wait, hold on. Right? And uses the flat 6th after it goes to C. So he's using Dorian on the first phrase, and he's using Aeolian on the second phrase, or just the natural 6 and the flat 6. But it's a perfect use of these. And I can't think of another example in a pop song. I don't know if I've ever found another example that uses the natural 6th and the flat 6th in the same song on a minor chord. Chris Cornell, if I were to think of one person that might do it, there's 2 people that I think might do it. Maybe 3. Chris Cornell, Sting, or Joni Mitchell. Those are the only, or Paul Simon would do that, probably. So those 3 that write very sophisticated melodies, they would use that. But that is a perfect example. He didn't go da 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 because it would have been weird, right? Da 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 da. That so he's using da 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 because that flat 6 wants to fall down to the 5th. The natural 6 can actually hang on its own. The natural sixth is cool. It's very strong. It doesn't need to resolve down to the fifth because it's a step away. And it doesn't really need to... It can resolve up to the flat seven, but it doesn't have to. It can stay on its own. So that's a really good example of how to use the sixth on minor chords. So I would study these things, and I always study the melodies. Take your favorite songs, study the melodies of them. Just plunk them out on your guitar, on your piano, whatever it is. Figure out what the bass note is, and then what the note is above the bass note. Now, sometimes the bass note, you could have a B minor chord like in Day in the Life, and you're saying, oh, well, F sharp is the bass note, so it must be an F sharp chord. But it's actually a B minor chord. Anytime you have the Beatles, you always have to actually listen to the chord progression and see what it is, right? Because many times McCartney's playing inversions. He's doing it to make the melody more colorful, okay? So these are a great set of rules. Let me see if I did. I talked about harmonies here. So harmonies make use of notes that are not in the melody, other notes of the chord. If you're singing the third, harmonize with either the fifth or the root. If you're singing the fifth, harmonize with the third or the root. If you're singing the root, harmonize with the third or the fifth, or try not to sing the root. Okay? And and be careful of using the third in the melody on first inversion chords, okay? Because it's a very weak move. It weakens your melody. So you can't always get away with it. You'll find it. There's Elton John songs that do it. There's a lot of famous songs that do it, but it's typically not, you don't hear it that much. And most of the time, if you do your bass parts later, you'll figure out how to avoid those things. Now, sometimes your melody is locked in with your chord progression, right? But you want to always think about, well, if I change the bass note here under the chord, using either the third or fifth in an inversion, does it make the melody note sound stronger, or the melody line? So you always want to be thinking, how do I make the melody sound stronger? What can you do? When I would accompany people in a song, coming up with parts, I'd always think of, what is the melody note? What parts am I going to play on the guitar or on the organ or on whatever it is, If I'm going to program if I'm going to put a pad in there, if I'm going to do any counter melody, I'm always thinking, what is the melody note? What are the other notes available? I don't want to be doubling that note in the part that I'm playing. I want to leave the melody to speak on its own, right? So if the third is in the melody, I try to avoid the third in my voicing. Too many thirds weaken the chords. Oh, this is good stuff here. Let's see. Any questions here, Billy? Billy's not even paying attention to questions here. That's okay. Let me see. I'll take a look here. Someone asked if McCartney knew what he was doing. Of course he knew what he was doing. He was a bass player. He knew what notes were available, and if he didn't, he messed around till he came up with stuff that sounded good. He had George Martin sitting right there, too, that was one of the best composers and arrangers around that could tell. You can't discount George Martin's influence, since he wrote these unbelievably great orchestrations. He was an incredible orchestrator. He knew what kind of harmony parts would sound good. And although he was never one to take credit for things, and I'm the biggest Beatles fan in the world, George Martin, just having him there and having that influence, and those guys hearing parts, they just started hearing, if you look at Eleanor Rigby, the string part, right? Or Yesterday, what parts George Martin was putting in the arrangement and how it framed the melody. Because you always want to frame the melody with other notes that are not competing with it. And competing with it would be notes that may be a half step away from the melody, or the melody note. Okay, so always want to do things like that. Look for things like that. I found a lot of the metal bands that I worked with did a lot of root doubling in their melodies. They'd have riffs and things like that, but you would find that when really great melody writers over riffs, guys like Chris Cornell, they knew to have sustained notes when the melodies were moving, right? If you think of Hey Man, Nice Shot, I did in my drop D thing. Those are all long notes in the melody. Hey man, right? Because you don't want to have a melody that's competing with a moving line. You want to if you have a moving line, you want to have a static melody. When you have a static under part, then you can have a moving melody, right? Makes sense. So these are really great tips. All this stuff is in my book, and the ear training course will help you develop how to hear these chord progressions. Like, what note am I hearing? This is the most important part of interval training. How do you know if you're hearing this chord and you hear that note against it? Oh, that's the sharp 4. That's the sharp 11. You just instantly recognize that, right? So that's part of ear training, is to recognize what the intervals of the melody are in relation to the bass note, okay? I didn't say the root note, the bass note, because the chords can be an inversion. Discount code Xmas, Xmas, 40% off both my Beato book 4.0 and my Beato ear training. If you have questions, leave it in the comments section. I'll be back on next Saturday, day after Christmas. Billy, you have something to say or what?
Oh yeah, we still got some time for questions.
Okay, what do you got?
One was, what about using the sixth as a passing tone on major chords?
Yeah, the sixth can work as a passing tone, absolutely. But you don't want to be building a house on the sixth, as I say. You don't want to be sitting on these notes. That sixth, if you use the sixth, it should resolve down to the fifth. You can use it in a passing line, of course, but you don't want to be. It's not a target note like using the ninth here or using the sharp 11 here, that are really important notes in the melody that hit on downbeats. When you're hitting on those downbeats and you have those tension notes, I call the upper extensions tension notes. Sevenths, ninths, 11ths, 13ths. Those are tension notes or color tones. Or my friend Danny calls them haunting tones, okay? Which I always thought was a really good, kind of a cool name for them, haunting tones. But I call them color tones. Billy, what else you got?
Some people ask about, like, can you talk about some artist melodies, like Plenty's or something? There's some other stuff like how do intervals interact with, like, progressions? How important are they?
Well, everything that they interact exactly like I'm saying. It doesn't matter whether it's Pliny or Animals as Leaders or the Beatles or, whoever. Melody notes are melody notes. Doesn't matter if it's got a distortion on it. If it's Steve Vai, if it's Satriani, these guys. Satch knows how to use the sharp 11. He knows how to use these color tones. That's why people really always loved his melodies that he did, because he used a lot of upper extensions like that. And pretty much everybody, and Pliny does too. That's these are people that can write really great melodies use these same things. It doesn't matter what the style of music is. It doesn't matter how complex it is. It can be jazz, classical, whatever. They always follow these rules. I call them principles of melody. Okay, this is really what you learn if you go to music school and you learn 4-part writing, SATB, they call it, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. These are the rules, but I've condensed them in a simple way here to teach to you guys right now. This is a much simpler way of learning it than taking a course where you have to make sure all your voice leading is right. You don't have any hidden fifths. You don't have any hidden parallel octaves, or, you don't have any weird motion or anything. But this is something to always keep in mind when you're working on your melodies. Go through, when you settle on your melody, go through, analyze it, and say, what am I using here? Oh man, I got a lot of roots in here. Well, can I change some of those? Write out your chord progression just like that, then write over it. Write the numbers of the scale tones in relation to the root of the chord, okay? So if I have the note A on a G chord, that's the 2nd or the 9th. If I have E on that, that's the 11th. If I have B on this, that's the 5th of that chord, right? If I have B on that, that's the 7th of that chord. If I have B on that, that's the sharp 4 of that chord, or sharp 11. B is the 2 on that chord. C is the 3. F is the flat 6. F sharp is the natural 6 or 13, right? So I know all these things because I used to be a college professor. I used to teach this all the time. That's why. I taught it a million times. Okay, this is great. You guys are awesome. Have a great holiday. And Xmas is the discount code. 40% off Beato book and ear training course. You guys are amazing. You can send gift. There's a gift card on my website too if you want to buy this for anybody, the Beato book or the ear training course. We'll see you guys. Thanks.